Most teachers will tell you that Norwegian bokmål uses 3 genders. Masculine, as in en stol, stolen. Neuter, as in et skap, skapet. And feminine, as in ei uke, uka. As you might already know, feminine words can be inflected as masculine. So let's call this F/M. So most Norwegian learners are taught to use the feminine form whenever possible. Dette ei skjorte, ei grønn skjorte. The reason they teach the feminine form is supposedly because it's used all across Norway, and to some degree that is true. However, a very big part of the Norwegian population actually only uses 2 genders. Since it's accepted to use the masculine form on all the nouns in the yellow circle, they just simplify everything by merging the 2 groups together into one big category of words and inflect them all as masculine. This is usually what's referred to as common gender. So ei uke, uka, becomes en uke, uken instead. Ei skjorte becomes en skjorte. And ei leilighet becomes en leilighet. And that's perfectly fine. In fact, this is super common not only in standard Eastern Norwegian, but also in what traditionally has been considered a prestigious upper-class dialect in all major cities. And this is because historically, the Norwegian urban elite used to speak a mix between Danish and Norwegian. Think of it as Danish with a Norwegian accent. And at that time, Danish did no longer use the feminine form. Check this out.
Ombord I den seilskuta så ble en liten jente født.
This is the Prime Minister of Norway saying en liten jente instead of ei lita jente.
En liten jente født.
So my question is, when so many Norwegians keep things simple by using a 2-gender system, why should someone just starting out learning Norwegian have to learn a more complex 3-gender system? Because, as you may already know, you can use both feminine and masculine in the yellow circle. And in the beginning, you might have to guess what gender a word is. Is it en stol, ei stol, or et stol? But when you've merged these 2 into one big category, guessing what gender to use is a lot easier. If you keep the 3-gender system, you might accidentally inflect words that must be masculine as feminine, and that will sound horribly wrong to Norwegians. And it gets even worse, but first, let's just sum up my first point. No Norwegian will ever blink if you say en skjorte instead of ei skjorte, because they're so used to hearing the word skjorte being inflected as masculine by native Norwegian speakers themselves. But on the other side, if you use feminine inflection when you must use masculine, that will immediately sound very wrong. If you say jeg sitter på ei stol or jeg sitter på stola, Norwegians will pick that up as a mistake right away. So, forget about ei and you'll make everything easier for yourself. And also, you'll have a much more consistent style in your language. Because if you look over to verbs, most people will learn to use ET endings in class 1. Verbs like syklet and kastet instead of sykla and kasta, which stylistically is closer to using common gender than feminine. And just to be clear, both syklet and sykla are correct, but they reflect 2 different styles of Norwegian. Syklet is more conservative, and sykla is more radical. So a lot of you guys are taught to say and write jeg kastet ei flaske, which sounds stylistically inconsistent because you're choosing the conservative form kastet instead of kasta, and the radical form ei flaske instead of en flaske. Most Norwegians will either say jeg kasta ei flaske or jeg kastet en flaske. It's not wrong to say or write jeg kastet ei flaske, but in my opinion it sounds strange and artificial.
So when you've merged the red and the yellow circle together, you now have such a big category of words that are inflected as masculine that whenever you're guessing what gender a word is, you can just go for the common gender, and in most cases you'll be right. And after a while, when you're used to them, there are definitely some benefits in including some of the feminine forms, especially with the A endings in definite form. While a lot of people do say en jente and en hylle, they still say jenta and hylla in definite form. But in my opinion, this is best to do by acquisition and not by actively trying to memorize the genders. For absolute beginners, I would just stick to the two-gender system.
So by doing this, you can focus on other parts of the Norwegian language, for example on pronunciation. In this video, I share a simple trick that will add nuance and variation to the way you speak Norwegian. I'll even show you a simple exercise that you can do that I think you'll find helpful.